Welcome to Glow for Hope, sparking conversation on mental health, where we break the silence, build community, and ignite hope. We're here to talk about what really matters: mental health, wellness, and the conversations that help us all feel seen and supported. Every episode will bring real stories, expert insights, and practical tools to help you navigate mental wellness and suicide prevention. Because together, we can change the conversation. Let's get started. Welcome back to Glow for Hope, sparking conversation on mental health, where we spark conversations, create community, and remind people they're not alone. Today's guest is someone whose professional work is all about helping others find clarity and direction. But today we're going deeper than that, because behind the scenes, behind the strategy, there's a personal journey, one that touches on identity, pressure, and what it takes to really find your voice. Maliha Khan is the founder and CEO of Connect the Dots and Concept Studio, but today she's here to share more of the story behind the person. Maliha, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Your bio, as you know, is all about helping brands find their voice. But let's start with your voice. Was there a time in your life when you felt like you didn't have one or were afraid to use it?
Absolutely. Um, Growing up, being a part of the American identity as well as the Pakistani identity, I often felt like I didn't fully have a seat at the table at like either one. And that naturally presented the opportunity of me looking within to find my voice, to kind of figure out who I am and what I wanted out of life and how I wanted to go about uh being someone from both groups.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so you've experienced different environments growing up and throughout your life. So what were some of the moments or transitions that shaped how you saw yourself?
I think often feeling like I was in between worlds. And at time I was too different for certain spaces and then not enough for like other spaces. And so throughout my life, I've constantly had that struggle of being too much, not enough, too much, not enough. And I think you learn early on because of that, that belonging isn't always handed to you. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then just as life went on later, I realized that belonging truly starts with self acceptance, really.
Yep, that's very true. Very true. Is there a particular moment that you felt like you had to choose between fitting in and being true to yourself? And what did you choose and what did it cost you?
I think I really started thinking about this in depth when I was starting my career, and immediately I felt like I had to tone myself down, which was a message that I have been receiving throughout my life. And so it wasn't a surprise, but I think when I was starting my career, I think I thought that I was going to land that great job and everything was going to be great, and I wasn't going to have any problems because I was skilled at what my craft was, and everything should be just great. And then soon enough, I realized that the same patterns kept showing up, where it was all about having to tone myself down, um, and then coming across as sometimes overconfident in certain situations when internally I didn't feel that at all. And then and then one of the one of the things that was really crystal clear is I was paying attention to everyone else's opinion far more than focusing on my own, if that makes sense.
It does. So many people, myself included, sometimes we get wrapped up in, oh, what everybody else thinks, and it doesn't really matter.
No, and then what happens is you subject yourself to this different kind of exhaustion, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
this mental exhaustion where you're constantly thinking about every move that you're making and how will that impact everyone else around you and what will they think. And the more those thoughts occur, the more you start to doubt yourself. And so it's a very vicious cycle once you get stuck in that. But eventually you have to choose authenticity over everyone else's comfort levels. And I think that's what really significantly impacted my journey, was the moment where I said, you know what, this is enough. Like, too much time has gone by focusing on everyone around me. And really, I need to step out as my full authentic self if we're going to do this right.
Hmm. So was there some certain event that happened that made you go that way, or if you want to share?
Yep. I think the biggest turning point in my life has actually been motherhood. Motherhood kind of accelerated all things that I was having over time, um, and struggling with the whole identity piece of it, like being too much, not enough, and toning myself down in every space. And motherhood is really interesting because it makes you uh it really makes you think hard about the little faces that are staring back up at you, and
Hmm.
how are you going to model confidence for them. And once I started thinking about that, and once I started going around towards that journey, it was very crystal clear to me that I had to kind of preach what I was, take my own advice and oh man, what's the
You
phrase?
have to walk the walk and
You have to walk the walk, and you
and
can't just
talk the
talk
talk.
the talk. So that was very, very crystal clear to me that if I was going to have any kind of impact on my twin girls, I needed to show up bravely, and I needed to show up authentically, and I needed to be a very good example for them so they can go
Mhm.
out in the world and feel confident and feel like they can be exactly who they are as they are.
So you keep referring to tone yourself down. What, how would you define that?
So, very early on, I talk about, like, I received what I call the good girl blueprint. I feel like every one of us has some sort of blueprint that we are kind of given as soon as we're born.
Hmm.
So it looks a little bit different for guys in my mind, and for women, I feel like it looks very different in the terms of mine specifically was kind of like, don't be too loud, don't be too opinionated, always be modest, always listen to elders, um don't challenge the status quo. You can be educated, but there's a certain limit. Family responsibilities trump education. um the list goes on.
Hmm.
There's I think like a different set of expectations that I had placed on me. And so when I thought a lot about what life was going to be like for my daughters, I wanted that game to change. I
Hmm.
didn't want them to be handed the same blueprint. I wanted them to know that they could go reach for the stars, and there was no limitation to what they could do. And they can be their most authentic self and still have a place where they will be loved unconditionally. And for me, a lot of times I felt like the concept of unconditional love was just so much up in the air. Like, I didn't quite understand it. Um,
Hmm.
and I still look back today and try to understand, like, when did I really feel like others around me loved me unconditionally, and when did I not feel that way? And then I try to like weigh, so did I feel unconditionally loved, or did
Hmm.
I not? Because right now, when I look back, I just, all I see is all the confusion that I had about
Hmm.
identity. And was I American, was I Pakistani, was I Muslim, like, which category am I? If I'm everything, then what does that mean? Like, how do I need to show up? And so
Right.
I think for me, it's all about making sure that my girls are not confused, and they know exactly what place culture, religion, identity has in their lives.
So during those years when you were kind of figuring out who you were, was there something specific that aside from your girls being born that that helped you shape that sense of identity?
I think the identity piece was already there at that point. It was just a matter of like over the years, because I had learned to tone myself down so much,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't just express it as often as I wish I did, or I didn't feel like I could show up fully as all of the different facets to me, right? Like I really couldn't display them all at the same time. It
Yeah.
depended on which room I was. And so kind of like this thought of shape shifting, right? Like kind of like it really just depends on which room I'm in now, and then this switch turns on, and then if I enter another room, then we turn that switch off and we turn on this one.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there wasn't really ever a time prior to motherhood where I felt like all of the different things that are a part of me can be on display at the same time. And then motherhood, it was like, oh boy,
Mm-hmm.
the staring at the mirror and no more. Like we're not doing this switch is off, this switch is on thing anymore, because try explaining that to a kid, you know.
Yeah.
Um, it just doesn't make any sense. And so another thing that happened around the same time was a year after my twins were born, I got laid off. And so that I think just was the last push I needed to be like, you're never going to get the type of acceptance that you're looking for anywhere else because you keep toning yourself down. So, how about we just double down on who we really are?
Mm-hmm.
And if people like you, they like you. And if they don't, then it's all right. Because if I can already deal with the loss of having this job and having all these friends that I made at this job and all the great work that I did and the blood, sweat, and tears that went towards it, then I mean, what am I really losing here? It just, when I look back, the moment I decided to take the business full time was such a pivotal moment because one, it was about damn time. And then number two,
I remember having a conversation with you about that.
yes. And then number two, it really was about I need to show up fully as myself
Mm-hmm.
if we're going to do this thing. And then in that process, I remember calling my business coach and on the verge of tears and saying, I just realized to the extent that I toned myself down working a job. And it
Yeah.
just depended on what the culture was at that specific job and that what that workplace looked like and what what the definition of belonging was there.
Mm-hmm.
um and then now having to be the face of my own company, I was like, wow, I used to be this loud, vibrant personality, which is crazy because you probably still think I'm very loud and vibrant when you met me at CEX.
I
But
think I mean I met you before this
yes,
kind of transition happened, and
yes. So you
to
met me at a really good time.
yeah, and it was more about the acceptance part
Yeah,
and having the confidence and the courage to, that yeah, people do want to listen to what I have to say.
absolutely. Yep.
And
And so I was kind of in the middle of that. I was
hmm
trying to figure out, okay, what is life? Like, what does this really mean? And no, so it was such a beautiful thing um to just kind of realize like, wow, I let other people's expectations become priority instead
hmm
of what I wanted and how I wanted to show up and who I really am. And the way I like to talk about it now that I go about speaking to different groups, especially women, I say, when you show up to work, you don't take off a cape that says mom.
hmm
Those leadership skills that you learn as a mom come to work with you. And so I think a lot of times we're taught to kind of like separate everything out. And that's not true, because all of these things make you who you are. And so that's why I say motherhood was really the turning point, where I was like, that we're not doing this dance anymore. We're going to show up exactly as who I am. And
Hmm.
the people that really care about me and really like me for who I am are going to stay. And the ones that don't, it's okay. You do
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. That's all right. And the whole expectation thing it's a double-edged sword. It's not good on either end to have the expectations for people or for people to have the expectations of us. And if they do have expectations, make them known. Nobody can meet the expectations that they don't know.
No, that's absolutely true. And so what's really interesting though is like staring at my girls reminds me so much of me and
Hmm.
certain situations that I had to navigate. And then there are times where I find myself acting as some of the adults that were around me, like simple things, like, you know, sometimes if I'm having a bad day or something, I might not handle a conflict with the girls the way I normally do. Normally we say, "Oh, are you having some big feelings? Let's talk about it. Do you want mom to sit with you?" And so my girls now know emotions that I didn't even know
Hmm.
when I was their age.
And
Okay.
that's so important to
Oh,
model those things as a parent or caregiver of any young child to model those things and be okay in your feelings and
it's
express
such
them
a
and
game
learn
changer.
it as early as possible.
It's such a game changer because it's such a beautiful thing to me when one of the girls will come up to me and say, um, "Mommy, I'm sad." Okay, let's talk about it.
Mhm.
Whereas I probably didn't have that channel of communication when I was growing up. At least I didn't feel like I did.
Yeah. Suck it
And
up, buttercup, and get over it.
yeah, exactly. Suck it up, buttercup. So, I mean, there are things now, that situations that are presenting in front of me that sometimes trigger me, and I have to figure out why. Like so it's almost like I'm still growing up. It's crazy, because they say like motherhood is looking at yourself in the mirror, and I really feel like that's the case. And so I think it's not just that motherhood was a turning point. It's like I'm constantly learning right now, because
Hmm.
there are certain situations where if I reacted in a certain way, I kind of have to look deep inside and say, whoa, 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 what just happened here? Like, she's just 2.5 years old and she doesn't know better. But the way you're getting upset is as if she's like 10 years old
Yeah,
and something else is going on. So let's kind of look inward now. And I think that's such a important process.
I agree. I agree. It's to be self-aware like that and to be willing to look at those things that we know we're not doing up to par. I don't want to say wrong because we
Yeah,
only know what we don't know.
absolutely.
Um, but to be able to have the strength to look inside, examine how we can change our own behaviors and thought processes, and then that just gets, passed along to our kids. And it
That's my
builds
hope.
their resilience and coping skills. And
Yep. And so that's my goal. Is I've been very resilient in my life, and that is something that I want to pass on to them. And I think that's why I am taking the time right now to challenge myself and
hmm.
to really figure out, like, is it really about the toy that they broke,
Right.
or is it maybe I didn't have the space to break a toy and then not be met with frustration from whichever adult was in the room. It didn't necessarily have to be my parents, because my parents were working parents, and I
Hmm.
oftentimes, was at like someone else's house. So
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about this, but I mean, sometimes the hardest pressure isn't external; it's internal, like we're talking about now. And when you had the struggles with the expectations that you put on yourself or you felt from others, how did that really impact your mental health?
I think for a high functioning person like myself, um, which I didn't realize that I was a very high functioning person until like
Was
my early college years.
high functioning meaning?
High functioning meaning you think you can do anything and you're just so strong. And a lot of times high functioning people are also fixers. And I'm the firstborn and I'm a daughter. So I mean, if you peel back every one of those layers, you kind of figure out why there were definitely um stressful moments and frustration and just
Hmm.
self-doubt and
It's
privilege.
interesting. You talk about it from the oldest perspective. I'm the baby
Yeah.
of mine, and but I'm also a fixer, and it's like, maybe that's
uh,
kind of stems from having to fend for myself or something. I don't know.
Maybe. Yep, definitely. There is a reason. The more I keep navigating my parenting journey, the more I'm like, nope, there's always a reason. Um, and so I think what resulted from that was kind of like what you're saying. I knew I had to be self-sufficient. I had to be strong, and this is just the way life was. And I, for the longest time, suppressed emotion because I had a long list of to-dos and I was high functioning and I had to just get everything done. And in order to get things done, I don't have time for feeling, you
Yeah.
know, it's just going to slow me down.
It's hard to not get caught up in that when you have so many people relying on you for things.
Absolutely. And so it wasn't until one
And
day,
it's self-imposed.
yes, it's absolutely self-imposed, but I think we all just make the best of whichever situation we're in, right? And whatever um situations we have navigated in the past and we learn from them and then somehow we build some sort of narrative inside our heads that may not be 100% true. Um and like now I've had several conversations with my parents about, hey, like back when this happened, XYZ situation also took place. Like, why did you not help me? And they were like, we were never aware of the situation. You never came to us. And then that piece of information I wasn't feeding my brain, right? So may have missed a step.
And
So
that kind of leads back to expectations
yeah.
too.
And so that's why earlier when I said, it doesn't necessarily mean my parents did something wrong. It could have just
Hmm.
been like I was at somebody else's house and, maybe somebody blamed me for something I didn't do. And then that kind of, made me feel a certain way. And then, it just kept building towards this narrative that I fed myself all these years. But if I go talk to my parents now, a lot of times they're like, we didn't know that happened. When did this happen? Why didn't you tell us? So, I do think it really resulted in me feeling like I just had to be strong. Like this is just how life is. Life is tough, and you don't sit there and you don't feel emotion. But the funny thing about it is, you can only do that for so long because
Hmm.
your body will tell you. Your body has its own way of processing everything, and the mind has its own way. And even though mentally I felt like I was being strong, quotation marks, uh, my body was just like, oh, hell no, girl, we are not doing this. You are a hot mess and things need to slow down. And
Because you
so
were probably in a constant state of fight or flight.
all the time. And I didn't realize that because I thought I had it all, locked down and I was doing a great job.
Hmm.
Um, it wasn't until like I walked into a gym and I had just joined like a week or so ago, and we were still kind of figuring out what my plan is. And they checked my blood pressure and it was skyrocket high. And this is like maybe freshman, sophomore year of college. And immediately they were like, what did you do? And I said, I didn't do anything but drive here and walk into the room. They're like, did you eat something with like high salt or something? No. I've been hungry all day, you know. Uh, just literally had a granola bar in the car on the way, and they're like, this should not be that high. And that's really what, where when the red flag went up and said, okay, something's not right
Mhm.
if the blood pressure is already skyrocketing and I'm just in college right now. And then that kind of led me down exploring what resources were around me, and how do I manage my stress better.
Yeah, and that's such a key thing. We actually just I probably the prior episode to 2 years getting released. So we had Dr. Patrick Porter on who does this brain t he's a neuroscientist, and
Yeah,
it was all about stress and how to manage it, and it affects you in ways that you could never think of. And you carry it with you like you did obviously with go when you walked into the doctor and actually had your blood pressure taken.
absolutely.
So what does finding your voice actually look like for you beyond business or on business and a personal level?
I think it's all about being honest with myself, being honest with others about what I want, what is acceptable to me, and what is not. Being able to say no to certain things without feeling guilt, not apologizing for being as ambitious as I am. Um, and just really trying to make space for my hopes and dreams. And hopefully, if I do that well, then my girls will learn from an example that they should go for their dreams and not feel
Mhm.
like they have the guilt of having potential that wasn't really utilized. And so, along with that also comes better relationships, which comes from setting the right boundaries.
Very
I learned
important.
that very early. Um, it's all about the boundaries. And, once you're able to have an honest conversation with yourself, like I did, that I don't have to be the fixer. I don't have to always worry about everyone else's comfort level. I don't always have to be the one that's always nice and just making sure that, we don't ruffle any feathers. And, you know, it is okay to speak up and say, this isn't really what I want.
Mhm.
And I think that's really what happens when you find your voice. What I like to tell people is that the audacity to ask questions has been my superpower. If I
Mhm.
didn't know something, I always went and I always, just asked the right questions that I feel like I needed to ask to collect data, because I'm a very data driven person. And really, what that helped with was I was really collecting validation, is really what I was doing.
Mm.
You know, I was really trying to find the people that could validate my thoughts so that I felt comfortable enough to voice them.
But
And
if they didn't validate, did you just move on to somebody else?
yes, because my goal was validation, because I deep down inside knew who I am and what I wanted and how I wanted to navigate life. And there wasn't a piece of it that I felt like was wrong. It wasn't like, like I had some like twisted view of the world, or of how I needed to show up or things like that. No, like it was just I needed somebody to say that I mattered, my thoughts mattered, my priorities mattered, like it was okay for me to voice them and kind of give me permission in a
Mhm.
sense. And then the more I kept asking questions, the more I kept realized I don't need anyone else's permission.
Especially when you're in business for yourself.
Yes.
You don't have that boss or your coworker sitting next to you saying,
Mhm.
"Oh, look what she's doing," or you didn't meet what I the demands of the job or whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
you exchange a boss and coworkers for clients
Yep.
in our service kind of work, but
Yep.
there's still the that you don't necessarily have to answer to someone in the same way, except yourself.
And what's really crazy is I don't know if you can relate, but as a business owner, I'm harder on myself now than ever
Oh,
because
yes.
this is this is my baby. Like this is my thing,
Hmm.
you know.
It's your reputation
This
and it's your empire you're building instead of someone else's. And
absolutely.
but then that also transfers over to every client I represent too. That
Yeah.
I take pride in that, and it's different to have that sense of pride for a client than it is to be an employee.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
so
Yep.
it makes a huge difference in the way that you approach it. And something that you said earlier too about like the skills that you have as a mother, and that's just applying all of the things that you've learned in life in a different way.
Absolutely.
And we're all a work in progress. We're not going to
There
do
are,
everything 100% right or wrong, correct, whatever.
yep. There are times where things that I've learned in my career come through in parenting, and then there are times where, like certain childhood situations like impact how I parent. And I'm sure now as a business owner, like there are things that I've learned from parenting my own kids that I'm like, oh, okay, this needs to change in the business. And so I think that's why it's so important. I've been in those spaces before where it's like, oh, but you have to leave the mom behind, or not even the mom, like you have to leave this aspect of you behind when you walk in that door. But I don't think humans compartmentalize that way. I don't think those switches really exist like I had told myself. Like, oh, I'll just turn this switch on and that switch off. I think in
Right.
reality, just like you're saying, it all impacts how you show up.
Hmm.
It
And
just
it's
depends.
a tightrope at times because I always kind of took pride. I came from corporate world, and I from day one I've always run my business as even though it's just me, I've always still kind of run it with that corporate mentality.
Yep.
And there is a not to say that you ignore family while you're at work, but it is that tightrope that it's like, okay, I can't let my personal life impact my business life
Yep.
to the point where it impacts it. It's you you have to make the decisions in it, but it's also a respect on the other side that you know you have to respect that even though I'm running my own business, I can be a little flexible with my hours. I still have demands on my time. I still have a schedule to keep. I still have deadlines and all of that. But it's easier to set those boundaries with a client. Like I had a client one time that she did this. I had to put a boundary on her twice because I have an office outside my house, and she found my office. I did that just so that I could separate personal and business and not be staring at business all the time when I was at home. And she walked into my office unannounced, didn't even knock, just to open the door. I came in. She's like, "Well, there you are. I didn't know how to find you or how to get in touch with you," and which was really kind of odd to begin with. But I was just like, "Well, how do I get to meet with you?" I'm like, "You set an appointment. you know, you don't just come in my office." And then somebody else was like, it was a weekend thing, and they were calling about this or that, and it's like, okay, I'm all about if we haven't planned properly and something comes up and it's an emergency, it's okay to call me on the weekends or outside of
Yeah.
business hours. But otherwise, you know, we've already worked this out. What's that whole, poor planning is poor planning on your part does not constitute an
An
emergency on my
emergency
part.
on my part. Yes, absolutely. That's
Yeah.
my favorite line, by the way.
But
Yeah.
it is setting boundaries and just
Yes.
it's very healthy to do that. But one thing you were saying when I was asking about the validation piece was, yeah, I mean, you were looking for the validation and acceptance of your feelings and this and that, but this is something that I've struggled with as far as how do you set those boundaries and want to have that validation without being dismissive to the other party and kind of, and it's like you can't just throw their feelings out the window, but then you just get wrapped up in things. And so how do you delicately balance that?
I think it depends. I think in the business world, it's a really different because it's like I respect your time and you need to respect mine. And so I think it's kind of like it's even is what I'm trying to say. Um Now in the personal uh in the personal life, it's very different. A lot of times when I was setting those boundaries, I was setting boundaries with people that did not clearly understand what boundaries are. And then number two, um, they just had this high, like high expectation that was not achievable. And it was a hand me down expectation. It was something that they learned from their elders, and then those folks learned from the generation before them, and then it was just like a pass me down expectation, but nobody really could make sense of it, but it was just the way that things needed to be. And
Mhm.
so it wasn't just having to set a boundary, it was actually like challenging the thought process, and it was beyond just setting the boundary. It was having those conversations and saying, I will not do this. You don't have a clear reason for me to do this, and I don't think it needs to be this way. And then, you know, you just had to set the boundary and hope that they would get used to it, or like I'd pull in certain family members to help that person if they were really struggling with the
Mhm.
boundary. But honestly, that conversation is a conversation that comes up often in my household. My husband and I talk about it on a daily basis because one of the things that happens when you set a boundary is things are tough in the beginning. Finally, people kind of start getting used to it. Things go really well, but then somewhere, somehow, there's a drift that happens. And then
Mhm.
you start going backwards, and you don't realize that the person's pedaling backwards until all of a sudden you're right where you thought you started. And then that's the time where my husband and I are constantly having conversations to check, hey, do you think we're going backwards again? Because I don't know that so and so person that we set a boundary with, they did this the other day, and then that sparked a conversation, and I wasn't quite sure how to handle it because I thought
Mhm.
we were clear. And so then, like, we'll revisit that conversation over and over again, almost on a weekly, daily basis, I feel like,
Mm.
with all sorts of individuals, because I think culturally there were just high expectations for both of us being the firstborn in our families. And that kind of came with its own weight. And
Mhm.
the older we're getting, the more we're realizing, again, finding our voice
Mhm.
and realizing that we don't have to do some of these things that people around us have told us that we need to do.
Yeah.
And so I think I don't think it's easy to keep a boundary in place. I think that's the hard part. You can
It
set things all you want. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, it can be a challenge at times, but and it's not to say that somebody won't slip, because I know I do that with my daughter, and she reminds me, which is fine. But I don't know where I was going to go with that, but it's a constant thing that you have to work on, but it doesn't have to consume your life. And it
No.
doesn't have to be this, you always have to be pointed out that somebody crossed a line, or and there's ways that it can be handled and talked about. Communication is key, and it can be done in a polite, civil way that respects both parties.
But you nailed it right there when you said the key part is communication. I
Hmm.
think a lot of times that's why you have to set the boundary is the foundational piece of just communicating about certain topics is not there. We're just not talking about some of these things, whether it's a cultural issue or it's a family specific thing, like the family just doesn't talk about certain topics, whatever
Hmm.
that looks like. Maybe there's no time, but I think that's why you even need the boundary, is because that communication isn't taking place. And because of that, there are some bad habits or just unwanted behavior that's resulting and causing stress to somebody else. Right. And so a lot of
Hmm.
times in my situation, like I said, it was just these hand me down expectations, like just, you know, what you had to look like, what you had to talk like, what you had to sit like, what you had to stand like, you know, just and some things were really great. Like for example, one of the things that I actually appreciate is if there's an elder in the room and you're sitting on the sofa and there's no other seats available, you're supposed to get up and
Hmm.
let them sit, which nowadays I feel like those manners are just not there anymore. So there are
Right.
some things like that that, you know,
Yeah.
I was okay with, which I think are like a really great part of like some of those cultural expectations. But then there were other things where like the type of person I was going to marry or the type of job I was going to have and how many hours I was going to stay out of the house versus in. And then, you know, I can have a job, but I also have to come home and do all the home like household chores. But then I had three jobs when I was in
Hmm.
college and working, like going to school full time, and then coming home to like a pile of dishes at like 12 a.m. or 1 a.m. I mean, some of these expectations are not realistic now. So at
Right.
some point, you know, you bet I'm going to communicate.
That's
You
when you
know,
kind of loosen it up and it's like, you know what? I don't care if the dishes stay in the sink overnight. It's
yeah,
just in the grand scheme of life, it's okay. And you have
and
to give yourself permission for it to be okay.
absolutely. I'm like, we need to get a dishwasher. I'm like, this is not gonna, you know, I'll take 30 minutes to set the dishwasher, but we are not doing this because I mean it's 2 a.m. by the time I'm sleeping, and then I gotta get up by 6 to get out there by 7. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm talking about. It's like being a girl from my culture, there were just expectations anyway.
It's that
And
E word.
yeah, and then like being as ambitious as I am and whatnot, it becomes a lot to mentally
Hmm.
handle.
Yeah. Well, at Glow for Hope, we focus on space for real conversations around mental health because so many people are struggling quietly. From from your experience, why do you think people hesitate to talk about their mental health? And
This is
what has helped you personally stay grounded and take care of it over time?
this is a very important question because I think there are several things that prevent people from taking mental health seriously. Number one being stigma. There's
Mhm.
still to this day this taboo feeling about going to a therapist and seeking help or whatever resource that you might be trying to utilize. And then I think other people also have a fear of being judged. So, for example, um, you know, saying things out loud like, "Hey, I'm going to a therapist." You might be
Mm.
afraid that certain family members or friends or whatnot would judge you at work. They might judge you, right? So
Yeah.
I think now workplaces have gotten better about providing mental health like services within your benefits, EAP and whatnot. And so and then it just really depends on, I think, your background. Like for me,
Mhm.
it was a lot of cultural conditioning. Like we just don't go to a therapist. Um, we we just don't do that. The notion that if you go to a therapist, that means you're crazy.
Yeah.
And so that sparks a whole different conversation then, like, hey, this doesn't mean that I'm crazy. This just means I'm stressed and I'm not handling my stress in the right way. I don't know coping skills, and that's what I'm trying to seek here. And I think once you have those conversations, I mean, you said it right, communication is key. It's all about
Mhm.
conversations. Once you have those conversations with people that might be a little bit skeptical about, needing mental health services and whatnot, then I think great things come from that most of the time, where people then start to understand. Well, in my case, at least, it was more like, oh, you're stressed. You just need coping skills. Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Mhm.
And so I think just like trying to educate people around what does that mean when we say mental health services. It doesn't mean that I have to have some sort of disorder like schizophrenia or bipolar or whatever, right? It could
Mhm.
mean that something is just off balance inside, or it could just mean that I have a huge to-do list and need some help to manage my stress in a way that my body is not flagging it every now and
Mhm.
then, right? And then what happens if my body is flagging it? Then how do I take care of myself? Because um for example, fibromyalgia is horrible, and a lot of times stress is what will bring on like a fibromyalgia flare up, right? And
Mhm.
so there are things that like I had come across myself where I would go for a routine checkup and they're like, "Hey, we can tell that there's a lot of inflammation in your body." Mm, not sure why. So that stress really does have a way of impacting you in a huge way. And I think conversations are really a great way to kind of overcome some of the stigma and some of the fears that we have around seeking mental health care.
Mhm. Very well put. I like that. All right, we're going to shift gears here for a minute. This is something I like to do with some guests. It's just I'm springing this one on you. It's just a quick round of rapid fire questions. So
Okay,
quick answers to whatever comes to mind.
let's do it.
One word that describes where you are in life right now.
Where I am in life right now,
Uh-huh.
the only word that comes to mind is authentic, but that might not make sense in the in the way that so
There's no right or wrong answer.
okay.
So, what grounds you when things feel overwhelming?
My kids.
Something people misunderstand about you.
I have always been loud and annoying.
No, you're not. A boundary you've learned to protect.
Oh, um, if I feel uncomfortable, I need to say so,
Okay.
regardless of what the situation is.
What helps you reset after a hard day?
This is horrible, but a can of Pepsi and a good cheesecake.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah,
One thing that brings you joy no matter what.
my husband.
Aw. Well,
Yeah.
let's hope he's listening right now. All right, that's all on the firing squad. So, if someone is listening right now who feels like they don't quite fit in or they're still trying to figure out who they are, what would you want them to hear?
I would like to leave them with a few words of hope that regardless of what your situation is, there is always another side where I promise you the grass is greener. I really do think uh, there are three things that helped me personally. One was excluding the noise. I had so much just noise around me, and some of it was in my head,
Mhm.
misunderstanding situations or coming up with narratives that maybe weren't 100% true, and, not really being able to see past that. And so I think the if you feel like you are in a spot where things are just too much for you, everything is just too much and it's becoming very hard to handle, focus on what are some things that you can subtract out of your day or life in general. And then I also think that means looking at the people that are around you. Sometimes we have to make really hard decisions, and if there are certain people that are always bringing toxic vibes, and I call them vultures. I have
Hmm.
uh several people on a list that I feel like were my vultures, and then figure out a plan to get away from that, and surround yourself with the people that motivate you, uplift you, and believe in you, and you know, get yourself the right resources. I promise you there is a way that you can have the amazing life that you want. It just takes some hard work in the right direction to make it happen. And everybody goes through ups and downs in life, but the point is we just have to keep moving forward regardless.
Hmm. Very good. What are you most proud of when you look back at the path that you've taken? Not the business wins, but the person you've become.
I am very, very proud of the fact that I don't just show up unapologetically as myself. I encourage other people to do the same. The one thing that I am so happy about is growing up, I would often have young women coming up to me asking me things like, how am I so confident? And at that time, I didn't really understand what that meant. And the more I aged, the more I, have lived through different seasons of life, and the more I now understand what that was. That was other girls that saw how I chose to be myself in every situation. I may have toned it down, but I was still myself
Hmm.
to a degree. Nobody told me that if you wore a sparkly tank top, that meant it was like time to go to the club. I had no idea. That was my normal everyday. Nobody warned me. People failed me in my life. Um, but that's what gave off the confident vibe to this one young girl. I remember at a conference. I was in my early 20s, and her question just confused me. I said, "What do you mean? How do I show up confidently?" Because I always, at the end of the day, felt like whatever made me happy is what I was going to do. And it was all about, you know, joy in life, just like what's her name? Marie Kondo. Like, does it bring you joy? Then it's fine.
Hmm.
And so that's how I chose my clothes. That's how I did my makeup. That's how I, you know, just decided how I was going to show up, like physically. Um and I think now, having young girls and also having found my voice, I feel like it's so important for me to help motivate other young girls, not
Hmm.
just young girls, but the youth in general. But specifically, I can only relate to young girls, right? Because I've been one before. And so
Right.
I think that girl out there that feels like her skin is too brown, or the girl out there that feels like she doesn't see representation that looks like her, or the one who thinks she's got a big nose, or the one that thinks she's too overweight, whatever that looks like, I want them to know that regardless of what the world tells you, you are beautiful just the way you are, and you can do anything that you want to do. I often tell people the best thing that you can do is tell me that I can't do something. I will
Hmm.
show you. I
Right.
will show you. Watch me.
Hold
And
my beer.
hold my hijab. So that's what I like to say.
Hold
But
my hijab.
but really, it's like, like, you're gonna tell me I probably won't get married. Yes, I will show you. Told me I can't have the house and the car and the kids. Check, check, check. And so my goal, and the one thing that really brings me joy, is when I get to go out there and speak about my experience in hopes to motivate even one person,
Mhm.
you know, then my job is done.
Yep. Very well said. I love that. And you are a beautiful person inside and out. I will say
You.
that.
You are too.
Oh, thanks. Well, Maliha, thank you for sharing with us. These are the kind of conversations that remind people they're not alone. It's okay to be a work in progress, as we both are. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who might need to hear it. And as always, keep the conversation going. Thank you for joining us on Glow for Hope. If today's conversation resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, your mental wellness matters, and you are never alone. For more resources and support, visit glowforhopenfp.org. That's glowforhopenfp.org. Stay connected, stay hopeful, and keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep shining.
This podcast does not and is not intended to provide medical advice. The information presented on this podcast should not be interpreted or construed in any way as a replacement or substitution for medical advice. It is important that you discuss your condition, treatment options, or any questions that you may have with your doctor or healthcare provider.